The cold never bothered Dr. Evan Mercer. He had trained for years in extreme environments, remote deserts, Arctic tundra research camps, and deep-sea stations. But nothing prepared him for the suffocating stillness of the South Pole Station. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't the loneliness. It was the silence that seemed to seep into every crack of the metal station, wrapping itself around your thoughts, whispering dark possibilities when you tried to sleep. And it was here, thousands of miles from civilization, that something far worse than frostbite was coming for him. His friend, Dr. Martin Hale, had always been cautious, meticulous in every way. They had shared long shifts running experiments on ice cores and atmospheric samples, joking about returning to civilization alive. Hale was brilliant, kind, and disciplined. That's what made his death so incomprehensible. It began on the third week of June, when the Antarctic winter locked them in for months, cut off from supply flights and radio relays that only worked intermittently. The station's 10-person crew had settled into routines, rotating shifts, communal meals, and late-night talks about their families back home. Then Martin fell ill. At first it seemed like fatigue. He complained of a headache, dizziness, and trouble seeing. His lips turned pale and his speech slurred. Evan had seen altitude sickness before, but this felt different. The station medic, Dr. Alvarez, administered fluids and vitamins, but Martin's condition worsened. Could be viral, Alvarez suggested. Or stress. We're trapped. But Evan wasn't convinced. On the fourth day, Martin was found unconscious in his bunk. His breathing was shallow, his pulse erratic. They rushed him to the infirmary, where Alvarez monitored him overnight. But by morning Martin was gone. The official cause of death was listed as acute organ failure secondary to unknown causes. The station commander, Colonel Briggs, urged discretion. They had only limited communication channels and no ability to perform a full investigation until resupply arrived. But Evan knew better. Something about it felt deliberate. He had sat with Martin's body, watching as the pale, almost translucent skin hardened in the cold room. And then, while rifling through Martin's notes, he found something that made his blood run ice cold. There, tucked into a folder with chemical assay results, was a scrap of paper. A handwritten note. Stay out of this or you'll be next. The handwriting was hurried but deliberate, the sharp strokes unmistakable. Evan felt the weight of it immediately. Someone here, someone he worked with daily, was warning him off. Someone who knew Martin had asked questions. His stomach clenched. He glanced at the others at dinner that evening, forcing calmness. The dining area was sterile, metallic, and dimly lit, but the tension was palpable. Conversations fell silent as Evan entered. Colonel Briggs's eyes were steady, unreadable. Dr. Alvarez avoided eye contact. Dr. Klein, the communications officer, smiled too brightly. And near the corner, a shadow shifted. Evan's instincts screamed, one of them is guilty. He began to retrace Martin's last days. He remembered how Martin had been working late with data files, how he'd questioned the supply manifests, specifically the lab chemicals delivered last month. Martin had complained about discrepancies in the storage logs, mentioning missing containers of industrial alcohol. Methanol. The thought hit Evan like a hammer. Methanol poisoning could mimic other illnesses, headache, confusion, blurred vision, before leading to death. If someone had tampered with Martin's rations, even a few sips could have been fatal. That night, Evan broke protocol. After everyone had gone to bed, he crept into the lab storage room, heart thudding in his chest. The containers were locked, but one shelf was ajar. Someone had hastily forced the latch. Inside, several labeled bottles were missing. His hands trembled as he checked the remaining stock. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough. The next day he approached Colonel Briggs. "Sir, something's wrong," Evan said in a low voice, careful to avoid others. Briggs's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "It's Martin. I think he was poisoned. Someone's tampered with our supplies." Briggs's jaw tightened. "You're suggesting one of us is responsible?" Evan nodded. "Yes." For a long moment, Briggs stared at him. Then his expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Briggs placed a hand on Evan's shoulder. "We can't have paranoia spreading. But paranoia had already taken root. The next few days were a waking nightmare. Evan slept with a makeshift alarm, tin cups rigged with string to the doorframe. He refused to eat from communal supplies, relying only on prepackaged sealed meals. Every glance felt like an accusation. Every movement, a threat. Late one night, while poring over station logs, Evan heard footsteps in the corridor. He froze. A shadow moved past the door, paused, and vanished. The next morning he found another note slipped under his bunk. "You can't hide forever." His pulse surged. He wanted to confront the group, but suspicion would fracture the team. They were already isolated, dependent on one another to survive the polar winter. Reporting to headquarters would risk delaying evacuation and jeopardizing supplies. Evan's mind spun in circles, fear, anger, and helplessness colliding with reason. He pored through data, reconstructing Martin's last meals. He documented inconsistencies, missing containers, altered logs, unexplained chemical levels and water samples. But without definitive evidence, all of it was circumstantial. He approached Dr. Alvarez privately. "I need to know everything." Alvarez's eyes darted around before he spoke. The records were incomplete. Supplies went missing. "We thought it was an accident." "Do you think it's sabotage?" Alvarez hesitated. "We don't know." Dr. Klein, meanwhile, grew strangely quiet when Evan was nearby. Colonel Briggs ordered stricter protocols but discouraged investigation. "We need unity," he barked during a team meeting. No further discussion. But Evan knew someone was watching him. 2 nights later, he awoke to the sound of something scraping across the metal floor outside his door. He reached for the tin cup alarm but stopped. His breath caught as a figure appeared at the peephole, only a blurred silhouette, then gone. He slammed the door shut and sat listening, frozen, until dawn. The days blurred into a cycle of paranoia and exhaustion. He recorded everything: logs, timestamps, food intake, chemical readings, hoping that when rescue came the truth could be exposed. But rescue didn't come for weeks. By then the killer had vanished as seamlessly as they'd appeared. The autopsy conducted by Alvarez confirmed what Evan had feared. Methanol poisoning. Clear as daylight. When the supply flight finally arrived and authorities investigated, the entire station underwent questioning. Yet, without proof, without witnesses willing to speak, the case was archived as undetermined cause. The killer, whoever it was, had melted back into the white emptiness. Evan left the station with the memory of that icy silence following him everywhere. He tried to warn others, but who would believe a man haunted by shadows, sabotaged supplies, and anonymous threats? Even now, late at night, when the wind howls against his window, he remembers Martin's pale face, the threatening notes, and the cold knowledge that somewhere out there, perhaps still at that station, someone waits in silence. And Evan knows. He may never be safe again. There are few places left in the world where silence isn't broken by sirens, traffic, or the endless buzz of electronics. 4 miles Harper and Dean Carter, the Arctic Research Outpost, was that place. Miles of frozen wasteland, a small steel structure buried in snow, and nothing but the endless cold wind for company. It should have been paradise for 2 men who loved isolation. They were both scholars, writers, readers, thinkers. Miles had come to document climate patterns and track atmospheric shifts. Dean was cataloging rare fungi and microbial life trapped in ice cores. But the solitude, the long hours, and the constant hum of darkness wore them down. At first it was harmless. They traded books, debated theories, and stayed up late over mugs of scalding coffee and rationed whiskey. They laughed about how polar life was driving them mad. Then came the book spoiling. It started innocently enough. Dean would lean over and casually mention a plot twist after Miles had barely gotten into a story. "Oh, that part? You'll love it when," he'd say, only to realize Miles's face had gone stone cold. Miles, being meticulous and disciplined, kept journals, charts, and a rotating stack of novels to pass the time. He treasured the stories, clung to them like lifelines. Dean, by contrast, had a cruel streak when it came to storytelling. He enjoyed the reaction, the look of horror when someone's experience was ruined in an instant. "I'm just being helpful," Dean would smirk. It's not helpful, Miles would snap. But Dean never stopped. Soon Miles began hiding his books, locking them in drawers. He'd turn pages in the dead of night, only to find the ending scribbled out or replaced with Dean's mocking notes. Should have paid attention to that foreshadowing, friend. It became a game for Dean, a way to break the fragile structure of Miles's mind. The outpost's isolation left nowhere to escape. They shared the same mess hall, lab, and generator room. There was only one entertainment system, and Dean would deliberately watch shows and narrate endings out loud at the worst possible times. The other scientists kept their distance, and the radios barely connected to the outside world. One night, after Dean revealed the final twist of a novel Miles had been reading for weeks, Miles slammed his book shut so hard it cracked at the spine. "This isn't funny," Miles hissed. Dean leaned back, smiling in the dim light. "Come on, it's just a story." "It's my story." Dean shrugged. "What's the big deal? You obsess too much." Miles's hands trembled. He wanted to strike Dean then, but something in his training stopped him. Instead, he walked away. But the next morning, when he entered the common room, he saw Dean seated smugly with another book in hand. "You know," Dean drawled, "I've already read this one. Should I tell you what's coming?" The others pretended not to hear. No one wanted to be dragged into their feud. It wasn't about the books anymore. It was about power, control, breaking the other person's peace of mind. The days dragged on, the temperature dropped, and the two men's conflict escalated with each passing hour. Their words became harsher, their silences longer. They stopped eating together, stopped exchanging greetings. The last straw came on the 16th day of March. A blizzard raged outside. The generator room lights flickered with each gust. Miles sat in the kitchen area, hunched over a battered paperback, eyes red from sleep deprivation. He'd locked himself away for hours, refusing to interact. Dean entered without knocking. "Hey, I figured you'd want to know," Dean grinned, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not interested." Dean chuckled. "Come on, it's classic." "I said no." Dean's grin widened. He walked closer. "The twist happens halfway through, but that climax? You'll be blown away." The air in the room thickened. Miles's jaw tightened. He clutched his book like a shield. "Enough." Miles barked, slamming it shut. Dean's eyes flickered as if amused by the outburst. "Relax," he drawled, stepping closer. "Don't be such a child." Miles's vision blurred. The room swam in white light. His heartbeat thundered. "I said stop," he shouted, rising to his feet. Dean's face hardened. "You think you're better than me? Think you're smarter?" Dean hissed. "You can't stand that I enjoy life more than you." That sentence ignited something in Miles. He surged forward, grabbing Dean's wrist. Dean shoved him hard. The chair overturned. The kitchen table wobbled violently. For a split second, both men froze, stunned by how quickly things spiraled out of control. Then Dean's eyes locked with Miles's and something primitive surfaced. Rage, humiliation, desperation. The knife block sat on the counter, half within reach. Dean's hand darted out. For a flash of time, the metal gleamed. The kitchen knife plunged into Miles's side just below his ribs. A strangled gasp tore from Miles's throat. Dean's expression twisted into horror, regret too late. The room fell silent except for the howling wind outside and the labored rasp of Miles's breath. Blood pooled rapidly on the floor. Dean dropped the knife as if it burned his hand. "Miles, he stammered. But Miles's eyes, wide with shock, locked on him. "I didn't," Dean whispered, backing away. The mess hall doors banged in the wind. No one moved. Minutes passed like hours before the emergency beacon was activated. The other crew members, shaken but determined, stabilized Miles and prepped him for airlift. The helicopter arrived with its blades thrashing snow into a white storm, and the medics winched Miles into safety. Dean stood by the door as the aircraft rose into the storm-laced sky, his face pale and haunted. The autopsy later confirmed that the knife wound missed major arteries. Miles survived. He returned home months later with scars, therapy notes, and a silence deeper than before. Dean resigned and vanished from public record. The last anyone heard, he checked into an isolated treatment center, unable to escape the echo of that night, the cold fury, the instant regret, and the knowledge that one foolish act in a frozen wasteland had nearly destroyed 2 lives. As for Miles, he never touched a book again without first locking it away. Some endings should never be spoiled. Sometimes the scariest threats aren't monsters, they're the people around us. Whether it's fear in the silence of a frozen wasteland, or a friendship pushed too far, danger can come from where you least expect it. What would you do if you were trapped with someone you couldn't trust? Or if a simple mistake turned deadly? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear how you'd survive. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life horror and suspense stories that will keep you up at night.